you have plus and minus x2i, so those two cancel out. So you have 4 minus 4 times negative 1 times x minus 1. Oh, forgot my x minus 1. There we go. Okay, so we actually have our f of x equals a times x plus 4, oh, x squared plus 4 times x minus 1. Okay, so now we go ahead and we just FOIL it again, because we're looking just for a regular, ordinary equation. Okay, so if we FOIL it again, our f of x is equal to a. Our first is x to the third. Our outer is negative x squared. Our inner is 4x. And our last is negative 4. Okay, so we have part of our equation, but we still have to solve for a. Okay, and that's where the little bit that they gave us at the beginning comes in. Okay, so if you remember right at the beginning, I'm going to roll back down in a minute. They said it has an output of 16 when x is equal to 2. So in other words, f of 2 is equal to 16. Okay, so it says output of 16 when x equals 2 is just a fancy way to say that f of 2 is equal to 16. Okay, so we know that f of 2 is just equal to a times 2 to the third minus 2 squared plus 4 times 2 minus 4 equals 16. Okay, so we just go ahead and solve that part. Okay, so that means that a times 2 to the third power is 8 minus 2 squared is 4 plus 8 minus 4 equals 16. Okay, so you have negative 4 is negative 8. 8 plus negative 8 is 0, so that's just a times 8. Okay, so a, give it a little arrow there. A times 8 equals 16. Divide both sides by 8. We know that a equals 2. Okay, so using this function here, and once we solve for a, we know that our function f of x is equal to 2 times x to the third minus x squared plus 4x minus 4. Okay, so this is your function that meets all the criteria at the beginning. The function that the output is 16 when x is equal to 2. We know that it has 0, 1, and 2i. So that's the function that meets all of those. All right, so any questions on that one? All right. Trying to see if we have time for one more example. We should be able to squeeze it in. Maybe one more example, and then we'll call it a day. So let's save, oh, still someone writing. All right. right, so let's say for our next example, what if we want to find all zeros of f of x equals x to the fourth minus 3x to the third plus 6x squared plus 2x minus 60, if we're given that 1 plus 3i is a 0 of that function. Okay. So this one, they actually gave us one of the zeros, and we just have to figure out the rest. Okay. So the one thing we know for a fact, that whenever a complex number is a 0, so is its conjugate. So if 1 plus 3i is a 0, so is 1 minus 3i. Okay. So we know for a fact also that it's a fourth degree polynomial. Which means we have f of x equals x minus some number times x minus some number times x minus some number times x minus some number. Okay, so we know this can factor into that. Okay, but we also know that two of those were given to us. So f of x equals x minus c1 times x minus c2 times x minus 1 plus 3i times x minus 1 minus 3i. Okay. Now we can't do anything with those two. We have no idea what c1 and c2 is. But these two, we can go ahead and simplify those two. We can FOIL those two together. Well, maybe not FOIL, but, well, you could FOIL them. Okay, so let's say if we FOIL those two. Okay, so if we go ahead and do that, just our x minus, actually we don't even have to FOIL. Yeah, FOIL would probably be a lot easier and quicker. X minus 1 plus 3i and x minus 1 minus 3i. Okay, so if we go ahead and do that, let's say our first is x times x, which is x squared. Our outer is x times negative 1 minus 3i. So it's negative x times 1 minus 3i. Our inner is negative x times 1 plus 3i. And our last is positive 1 plus 3i times 1 minus 3i. Okay. So here we just go ahead and start simplifying. We can distribute the x here, we can distribute the negative x there, and these two, we can go ahead and FOIL those two. So it's going to equal x squared minus x plus 3xi, or 3ix, doesn't matter really, minus x minus 3xi, or 3ix, plus, we're going to go ahead and FOIL that one. So you have 1, your outer is negative 3i, your inner is positive 3i, and your last is negative 9i squared, where you want to remember that I squared is negative 1. Okay, so if we go ahead and simplify this, because stuff is going to start canceling out. Those two actually will cancel each other out. And those two will cancel each other out. Okay, so that means we have x squared minus 2x remember that becomes plus 1 minus 9 times negative 1. Okay, so you have 1 plus 9, which is 10. So really it becomes x squared minus 2x plus 10. Okay, which is just those two. Once we simplify that, so that means that f of x is equal to x minus c1, x minus c2 times x squared minus 2x plus 10. Okay, so this is where it can get a little bit, I guess you could say, kind of tricky. Because we know that if f of x, let's say if we wanted to divide both sides, x squared minus 2x plus 10. Okay, so if we did that, x squared minus 2x plus 10, x squared minus 2x plus 10, and we know that f of x is equal to x to the fourth minus 3x to the third plus 6x squared plus 2x minus 60, then that means that x minus c1 times x minus c2 is going to equal x to the fourth minus 3x to the third plus 6x squared plus 2x. Should have wrote that down a little bit further. Minus 60 divided by x squared minus 2x plus 10. Okay, so we can actually solve for those two, well, those two factors with what we have. And we're going to continue that on the next page really quick. Okay, we can't use synthetic division because this is not x minus some k, so we have to use good old-fashioned long division. All right, I'll stop that for a second. Okay, so really we're just going to rewrite that. I'll go ahead and get that started. So x to the fourth minus 3x to the third plus 6x squared plus 2x minus 60 divided by x squared minus 2x plus 10. All right, no one's still writing this one. All right. Okay, so all we did was just go ahead and rewrite that one. And just like before, we're going to try and get rid of that x to the fourth. So we have to find out what times x squared gives us x to the fourth. Okay. So in this one, it's just x squared. X squared times x squared is x to the fourth. So we put our x squared right up there. And we multiply that x squared times everything. So if x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. X squared times negative 2x is negative 2x to the third. And x squared times 10 is 10x. Okay, so remember we multiply, now we subtract. So we subtract that entire thing. Now remember, you're going to distribute that negative. So you have negative x to the fourth, that becomes plus 2x to the third, and that becomes negative 10x. So x to the fourth minus x to the fourth is 0, so that disappears just like we planned it. Negative 3x to the third plus 2x to the third is just negative 1x to the third, or just negative x to the third if you want to put that. 6x squared minus 10x squared, because remember that becomes minus, is negative 4x squared. Okay, so we multiply, we subtract it, now we bring down. So we bring down the plus 2x. Okay, and now we want to get rid of that negative x to the third. Okay, so x squared times what will give us negative x to the third? That's negative x. So we put our negative x up here. So now we multiply. Negative x times x squared is negative x to the third. Negative x times negative 2x is positive 2x. Oh, 2x squared, sorry. And negative x times 10 is negative 10x. Okay, so now that we've multiplied, we subtract. Okay, negative x to the third, remember that becomes plus 1x to the third is 0. So those two cancel out just like we planned it. Negative 4x squared minus 2x squared is negative 6x squared. And 2x plus 10x is 12x. Okay, so we multiplied, we subtracted, now we bring down. Okay, that's the last one to bring down, so we won't have to bring down anymore. So now we want to get rid of the negative 6x squared. So what times x squared will give us negative 6x squared? And that would just be negative 6. So negative 6 times x squared is negative 6x squared. Negative 6 times negative 2x is positive 12x. And negative 6 times 10 is negative 60. Okay, so we already multiplied. Now we subtract that entire thing. Okay, so you have 6x squared. Remember, once you distribute that, it becomes plus 6x squared. So that's 0, just like we planned it. We have 12x minus 12x, which is also 0. And you have negative 60 plus 60, which is 0. Okay, so you have a remainder of 0. So we know that that's your answer. So that means that, we go back to where we started. X minus C1 times x minus C2, which we know was x to the fourth minus 3x to the third plus 6x squared plus 2x minus 60 divided by x squared minus 2x plus 10 is equal to x squared minus x minus 6. Okay, so that means that our function f of x, which is x minus c1, x minus c2, x squared minus 2x plus 10, will actually just become, we know that this is x squared minus x minus 6 times x squared minus 2x plus 10. Okay, so to find the zeros, we just have to factor those two. Okay, so this is just x minus 3 times x plus 2. And these two we actually had factored earlier, which is x minus 1 plus 3i and x minus 1 minus 3i. Okay, so we know all of our zeros is just where f of x equals 0. So that means that x equals 3, x equals negative 2, x equals 1 plus 3i, and 1 minus 3i are all of our zeros. Oh, sorry about that. I thought it was up high enough. Okay, and that's the end of that problem. All right, so any questions on that one? All right, so we're gonna go ahead and end it there. This is one of the few times we almost took up the entire 2.5 hours, so. It doesn't happen all the time.